Section 14 of John Inglesant, A Romance. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Dylan King. John Inglesant, A Romance by Joseph Henry Shorthouse. Section 14, Chapter 9, Part 2. When Inglesant left his brother and walked under the starry sky to his lodgings at Wadham, his mind was still at ease. He had taken a great interest in Lady Fentham and her husband. Indeed, his feelings towards the former were those of an attached friend, attracted by her lively innocence and good nature. He was, as the reader will remember, still very young, being only in his 22nd year. He was sincerely and vitally religious, though his religion might appear to be kept in subordination to his taste, and he had formed for himself, from various sources, an ideal of purity, which in his mind connected earth to heaven, and which, at this period of his life at any rate, he may have said faultlessly to have carried out. The circumstances of his youth and early training, which we have endeavored to trace, acting upon a constitution in which the mental power dominated, rendered self-restraint natural to him, or rather rendered self-restraint needless. It was one of the glories of that age that it produced such men as he was, and that not a few, men who would combine qualities such as, perhaps, no after age ever saw united, men like George Herbert, Nicholas Ferrar, Falkland, the unusual combination of the courtier and the monk. Yet these men were naturally in the minority, and even while molding their age, they were still regarded by their age with wonder and a certain kind of awe. It was not meant that John Inglesant was altogether a good specimen of this high class of men, for he was more of a courtier than he was of a saint. He was a sincere believer in a holy life, and a strong desirous of pursuing it. He endeavored conscientiously to listen for the utterances of the divine voice, and provided that voice pointed out the path which his tastes and training had prepared him to expect, he would follow it even at a sacrifice to himself. But he was not capable of a sacrifice of his tastes or of his training. On the other hand, as a courtier and man of the world, he was profoundly tolerant of error and even of vice, provided the latter did not entail suffering on any innocent victim, looking upon it as a natural incident in human affairs. This quality had its good side, in making him equally tolerant of religious differences, so that, as has been seen, it was not difficult to him to recognize the divine prompting in a Puritan and an opponent. He was actively sensitive to ridicule, and would as soon have thought of going to court in an improper dress as of speaking of religion in a mixed company, or of offering any advice or reproof to anyone. In the case which was now disturbing his mind, his chief fear was of making himself ridiculous by interfering where no interference was necessary. He passed a restless night, and the next morning went to Trinity Chapel, then much frequented for the high style of the music. He was scarcely here before Lady Isabella and young Lady Fentham, who lodged in that college, came in, as was their habit, dressed to resemble angels in loose and very inadequate attire. At another time he might not have thought much of it, but, his suspicion being aroused, he could not help, courtier as he was, contrasting the boldness of this behaviour with the chaste and holy life of the ladies at Little Gidding, and it made him still more restless and uncertain what to do. He avoided the ladies after chapel, and returned to his own rooms, quite uncertain how to act. It came at last into his mind to inquire of the secretary Falkland, whether Sir Richard Fentham was expected shortly at Oxford, as his journeys were very irregular, and generally kept a profound secret. He went to Lord Falkland and asked the question, telling him that he did so from private reasons unconnected with the state. Falkland declined at first to answer him, but on Inglesant's taking him a little more into his confidence, he confided to him, as a great secret, that Sir Richard was expected that very night, and further, that he would pass through Nuneham in the afternoon, where he would meet a messenger with dispatches. Upon learning this startling piece of news, Inglesant hastened to his brother's rooms, but found he was too late, Eustace having been gone more than 2 hours, and as he started considerably after the lady's coach, There could be no doubt but that the party was already in Nuneham. Inglesant went to the stables where his horses were kept, and having found one of his servants, he ordered his own horse to be saddled, as he was going to ride alone. While it was being prepared, he attempted to form some plan upon which to act when he arrived at Nuneham, but his ingenuity completely failed him. Merely to walk into a room where some ladies and gentlemen were at dinner, to which he was not invited, and inform one of the ladies that her husband was in the neighbourhood, appeared an action so absurd that he discarded the intention at once. When his horse was brought out, and he mounted and rode out of Oxford towards the south, telling his servant he should be back at night, he probably did not know why he went. He rode quickly, and arrived in about an hour. The plough at Nuneham, it has long disappeared, stood upon the banks of the river in a picturesque and retired situation, and was much frequented by parties of pleasure from Oxford. The gardens and bowling greens lay upon the river bank, and the paths extended from them through the fields both up and down the river. It was apparent to Inglesant that a distinguished party was in the house, from the servants loitering about the doors, coming in and out. More than one of these he recognized as belonging to Lord H. The absurdity of expecting any mischief from so public a rendezvous struck Inglesant as so great that he was on the point of passing the house. He, however, alighted and inquired one of the men whether any of his brother's servants were about. The man, who knew him, replied that Mr. Eustace Inglesant had dined there with his lordship and the ladies, but was then, he believed, either in the garden or the fields with Lady Cardiff. He had brought no servants with him. Having got thus into conversation with the man, Inglesant ventured to inquire, with as careless a manner as he could assume, if Lady Isabella were there. Lady Isabella, the man said, had dined there, but after dinner had gone on a little further in her coach, and attended by her servants, he believed to make some call in the neighbourhood. Then Inglesant knew that he had done right to come. "I have a message to Lady Anne Fentham," he said to the man, "but not being of the party, I would rather have sent it through my brother. As I suppose it is useless to attempt to find him, I shall be glad if you will tell me in which room the lady is, for I suppose his lordship is with her." "His lordship left orders that he was not to be disturbed," said the man insolently. "You had better try and find your brother." "Nevertheless, I must give her my message," said Inglesant quietly. "Therefore, pray show me upstairs." "I don't know the room," said the man still more rudely, "and you cannot go upstairs. His lordship has engaged the house." During the conversation, the other men had gathered round, and it seemed to Inglesant that his lordship must have brought all his servants with him, for the house appeared full of them. None of the ordinary servants of the place were to be seen. Inglesant had no arms but his riding sword, and even if he had, the use of them would have been absurd. "You know who I am," he said, looking the man steadily in the face. "One of the king's gentlemen whom they call the queen's favourite page. I bring a message to Lady Fentham from her husband, the secretary to the prince's council. Do you think your lord will wish you to stop me?" As he spoke, he made a step forward as though to enter, and the man, evidently in doubt, stepped slightly on one side, making it possible to enter the house. The rest took this movement to imply surrender, and one of the youngest, probably to gain favour, said, "The lady is in the room opposite the stairs, sir." Inglesant walked up the low oak staircase to the door, the men crowding together in silence at the bottom of the stairs. Inglesant tried the latch at the door, though he did not intend to go in without knocking. The door was fastened, and he knocked. For a moment there was silence, and then a voice said angrily, "Who is there?" "A message from Sir Richard Fentham," said Inglesant. There was another and a longer pause, and then the same voice said, "Is Sir Richard without?" "No," replied Inglesant, "but he may be here any moment. He is on the road." The door was immediately opened by his lordship, and Inglesant walked in. The moment he did, Lady Fentham, who was in the further part of the room, started up from the seat in which she was lying, and throwing herself on Johnny's shoulder, said, "Help me, Mr. Inglesant. I have been cruelly deceived." Inglesant took no notice of her, but turning to Lord H., he said with marked politeness. "I have to beg your lordship's pardon for intruding upon your company, but I am charged to let Lady Fentham know that Sir Richard is expected in Oxford tonight, and may pass this house at any time, probably in a few minutes. I thought Lady Fentham would wish to know this, so much that I ventured to knock, though your servants told me you wished to be private." His words were so chosen, and his manners so faultless and devoid of suspicion, that Lord H. could find nothing in either to quarrel with, though he was plainly in a violent passion, and with difficulty controlled himself. It had also the effect of calming Lady Fentham, who remained silent. Indeed, she appeared too agitated to speak. It was an awkward pause, but less so to Inglesant than the other two. "I wished," he continued, still speaking to Lord H., "to have sent my message by my brother, but I find he is walking in the fields, and Lady Isabella appears to have gone in her carriage to make a call in the neighbourhood. I presume she will call for you, Lady Fentham, on her way back." Lady Fentham made a movement of anger, and Lord H. roused himself at last to say, "I am much obliged to you, Mr. Inglesant, for the great trouble you have taken. I assure you I shall not forget it. Lady Fentham, as Sir Richard will so soon be here—" He stopped suddenly, as an idea struck him, and looking full at Inglesant, and said slowly and with marked emphasis, "Supposing Mr. Inglesant too—" To have spoken the truth, he would have said, but Johnny's perfectly courteous attitude of calm politeness, the utter absence of any tangible ground of offence, and his own instincts as a gentleman, checked him, and he continued, "has not been misinformed. You will not need my protection any further. I will leave you with Mr. Inglesant. Probably Lady Cardiff will be back before long." He took his leave with equal courtesy, both to the lady and Inglesant, and went down to his men. Anne Fentham sank into her chair, and began to sob bitterly, saying, "What shall I say to my husband, Mr. Inglesant? He will be here directly, and will find me alone. What would have happened to me if you had not come? If I may offer any advice, madam, I should say, tell your husband everything exactly as it happened. Nothing has happened of which you have need to be ashamed. Sir Richard will doubtless see that you have been shamefully deceived by your friends. As far as I understand the matter, you can trust to his sympathy and kindness." She did not reply, and Inglesant, who found the situation far more awkward than before, said, "Shall I seek for Lady Cardiff, madam, and bring her to you?" "No, don't leave me, Mr. Inglesant," she said, springing up and coming to him. "I shall bless your name forever for what you have done for me this day." Inglesant stayed with the lady until it was plain Lord H. had left the house with his servants, and then he left her and went into the garden to endeavour to find his brother and Lady Cardiff. But in this he was not successful, and returned to the house, where he ordered some dinner, for he had eaten nothing since the morning, and seated himself at the window to wait for Sir Richard. He had sat there about an hour when the latter arrived, and drew his rein before the house before dismounting. Inglesant greeted him and went out to him in the porch. Fentham returned his greeting warmly. "Your wife is upstairs, Sir Richard," Inglesant said. "She came down with Lady Isabella Thine, and is waiting for her to take her back." Fentham left his house with a servant, and the Raj upstairs, straight to his wife, and as Inglesant followed him into the house, he met Lady Cardiff and his brother, who came in from the garden. Eustace Inglesant was radiant, and introduced Lady Cardiff to his brother as his future wife. He took them into a private room, and called for wine and cakes. Johnny thought it best not to tell them what had occurred, but merely said that Sir Richard and his wife were upstairs, upon which Eustace sent a servant up with his compliments, asking them to come and join them. Both Lady Cardiff and Eustace appeared conscious, however, that some blame attached to them, for they expressed great surprise at the absence of Lady Isabella, and took pains to inform Johnny that they had left Lady Fentham with her, and had no idea she was going away. Sir Richard and Lady Fentham joined the party, and appeared composed and happy, and they had not sat long before Lady Isabella's coach appeared before the door, and her ladyship came in. The ladies returned to Oxford in the coach, and the gentlemen on horseback. Nothing was said by the latter as to what had occurred until after they had left Eustace at his lodgings, and Johnny was parting with Fentham at the door of Lord Falkland, to whom he was going. Then Sir Richard said, "Mr. Inglesant, my wife has told me all, and has told me that she owes everything to you, even to this last blessing, that there is no secret between us. I beg you to believe two things. First, that nothing I can do or say can ever repay the obligation that I owe to you. Secondly, that the blame of this matter rests mostly with me, and that I have let my wife too much." Inglesant waited for several days in expectation of hearing from Lord H., but no message came. They met several times and passed each other with unusual courtesies. At last, Eustace Inglesant heard from one of his lordship's friends that the latter had been very anxious to meet Johnny, but had been dissuaded. "You have not the slightest tangible ground of offence against young Inglesant," they told him, "and you have every cause to keep this affair quiet, out of which you have not emerged with any great triumph. Inglesant has shown by the line of conduct that he adopted that he desires to keep it close. None of the rest of the party will speak of it for their own sakes. Were it known, it would ruin you at once with the king, and damage you very much in the estimation of all the principal men here, who are Sir Richard's friends, and such as are not would resent such conduct towards a man engaged on his master's business. Besides this, you are not a remarkably good fencer, whereas John Inglesant is a pupil of the Jesuits, and master of all their arts and tricks of stabbing. That he could kill you in 5 minutes if he chose, there can be no doubt." These and other similar arguments finally persuaded Lord H. to restrain his desire of revenge, which was the easier for him to do as Inglesant always treated him when they met with marked deference and courtesy. The marriage of Lady Cardiff and Eustace Inglesant was hurried forward, and took place at Oxford some weeks after the foregoing events, the king and queen being present at the ceremony. It was indeed very important to attach this wealthy couple unmistakably to the royal party, and no efforts were spared for the purpose. Lady Cardiff and her husband, however, did not manifest any great enthusiasm in the royal cause. The music of the wedding festival was interrupted by the cannon of Newbury, where Lord Falkland was killed, together with a sad roll of gentlemen of honour and repute. Lord Clarendon says, "Such was always the unequal fate that attended this melancholy war, that while some obscure, unheard-of colonel or officer was missing on the enemy's side, and some citizen's wife bewailed the loss of her husband, there were on the other above 20 officers of the field and persons of honour and public name slain upon the place, and more of the same quality hurt. In this battle Inglesant was more fortunate than in his first, for he was not hurt, though he rode in the Lord Byron's regiment, the same in which Lord Falkland was also a volunteer." The king returned to Oxford, where Inglesant found every one in great dejection of mind. The conduct of the war was severely criticized, the army discontented, and the chief commanders engaged in reproaches and recriminations. One afternoon Inglesant was sent for to Merton College, where the queen lay, and where the king spent much of his time, where he found the Jesuit standing with the king in one of the windows, and Mr. German, who had just been made a baron, talking to the queen. The king motioned Inglesant to approach him, and the Jesuit explained the reason he had been sent for. The trial of Archbishop Laud was commencing, and in order to incite the people against him, Mr. Prynne had published the particulars of a popish plot in a pamphlet which contained the names of many gentlemen, both Protestant and Catholic, the publication of which at such a moment excited considerable uneasiness among their relations and friends. "I wish you, Mr. Inglesant," said the king, "to ride to London. Mr. Hall has provided passes for you, and letters to several of his friends. The new French ambassador is landing. I wish to know how far the French court is true to me. Prynne's wit has overreached himself. His charges have frightened so many that a reaction is setting in favour of the archbishop, and many are willing to testify in his favour in order to exonerate themselves. You will be of great use in finding out these people. Seek every one who is mentioned in Prynne's libel. Many of them are men of influence. Your familiar converse with papists, in other respects unfortunate, may be of use here." Inglesant spent some time in London, and was in constant communication with Mr. Dell, the Archbishop's secretary. He was successful in procuring evidence from among the papists of their antipathy to Laud, and in various other ways in providing Dell with materials for defense. Laud was informed of these acts of friendship, and being in a very low and broken state, was deeply touched that a comparative stranger, and one who had been under no obligation to him, should show so much attachment, and exert himself in so much in his service, at the time when the greatest danger attended any one so doing, and when he seemed deserted by both his royal master and by those on whom he had showered benefits in the time of his prosperity. He sent his blessing and grateful thanks, the thanks of an old and dying man, which would be all the more valuable as they never could be accompanied by any earthly favor. Inglesant's name was associated with that of the Archbishop, and the Jesuits' aim in sending him to London was accomplished. End of section 14.